Sana, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think you have, in a short span of time that you've been helping us out with Icon. You have become sort of an inspiration for many younger people, especially with what you do as an accelerator focused on gaming.
Yes.
So why don't we start talking about your, baby, the accelerators?
All right, certainly. So we started YetiZen about 3 years ago, and the idea was that we saw all these, entrepreneurs coming from different walks of life, suddenly making games, and all those businesses made some of the best games we've ever played. But then after about, a few months, those games would peak, go down, and then these guys would be running on this other mill making games again. And we were like, wait, this is not a sustainable and scalable business. How can we help that? And so the idea with Accelerator was, let's actually get about 60, 70 of the best people in games we know together to help mentor these people to that next phase of making a more sustainable and scalable gaming company. And so fast track forward where we are now, we're currently on our 5th round. We have 150 mentors that work with the companies in our accelerator. We take post-product game studios and platform plays with a number of different partnership deals for them because they typically have raised money before coming to us. And then we also have 9 of the most committed VCs in games that the companies get to meet, along with a couple of hundred other individual angels, strategics, both gaming and not otherwise. So 30 companies to date, and the highest funding raised to date in any of our companies is about 2.5 million, which is really great for a company that's only been around for a year, and which is around the average of most of our companies in the program.
I have a couple of questions on the investing methodology for these companies. One is, when you draw attention to VCs, I'm sure you also have a range of VCs.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it work when you draw attention from VCs and when you draw attention to angels?
Mm-hmm.
The differentiation between the two.
Right, so I'd say I'll start with your VC part first, because even in VCs there's some really big differences, right? So what happens is that most people think, game investments from VCs are down, which is actually not true. And the reason why they're thinking that is, anecdotally, if they're talking to the guys who invested in games 3 years ago, they're not the guys investing now. Because the people who invested 3 years ago are what I call the Wild Wild West VC. They're the ones who are like, new platform, lots of users, gold rush. If I can find a team that is able to acquire users cheaply, I'm going to bet on them.
Sure.
Those guys have that as a strategy and have since moved away from most of gaming. If they're doing gaming, it's on newer things like Ouya, or actually looking at Google Glass and things like that, right? So those are not typically the people still investing. But we have a different set of VCs, which actually don't come out and talk to the press as much, maybe because they have a very different approach to investing. And I call them category analysis-driven VCs. So they're thinking, mobile's been around for a while. What have I seen in other geographies? What have I seen in other platforms? That's going to be the next thing in gaming. What demos are not being addressed? And then they follow those types of startups over a period of time, 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and then invest in them. So venture capital in gaming has actually been about the same. It's dropped very little, overall about 40 million on a base of 735 million. That's not very big at all. And so that's what's happening on the VC standpoint. So being able to understand who is which very quickly is key to entrepreneurs succeeding in raising venture in games.
When you invite angels and you can at all, more than the money is the mentoring part that comes into play. Can you share some of your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so basically in gaming, there are very few angels that have actually done games before, right? And one of the reasons is, if you ever exited to a big company like a Disney, you probably have a non-compete saying you cannot invest, right? The other reason is that until about 3 years ago, games were a hit-driven business. You did not think about them as scalable startups. There was very little venture money going after it. It was kind of like the movie industry, where someone would invest in you, maybe take 40% of your company because of the fact that there's a high risk you may not succeed, and it was very much publisher-driven, so publishers would do funding deals. So the number of people who actually had gaming exits before may have actually been doing what's called a lifestyle game company and kind of exited by accident, right? So it was, I'm going to keep making games forever, I have no desires to scale and make it a big, exitable startup, and somewhere along the line, Activision maybe comes along and says, I like what you guys are doing, I want to take this off the market, don't want my competitors doing this. So those types of exits happen. Now those guys, what they know about business and how to run a gaming business is very different than what we need right now, right? So they are not thinking about games as service. They're typically thinking about working with publishers and thinking about like work for hire, which if you do that now, those type of companies do not get ventured, do not get acquired, or if they do get acquired, for very little money.
So when you look at the landscape of gaming, it's not completely fertile. What is the motivation for the VCs who are investing now? Is it because if you, like you gave the example 3 years ago, it was just Wild Wild West, you took a good example. But for the VCs who are investing now, is it the hope that things will be different with the current crop of technology and the entrepreneurs are doing it?
It's a different strategy, right? So that's actually a very, very good question. So what it's when you're actually looking at category analysis based plays, you have a bet of how big that, if this company wins in that category, how big that company is going to be, who's going to acquire them, right? So that's one set of investors who are thinking about, okay, who wins in the category, who acquires them. There's another set that's thinking about the next level, right? And that's the level I'm personally most excited about, which is how do we get the next IPO-able gaming company? And the answer to my mind is actually not just with, having a game company or a game platform, but it's actually about the intersection of different levels of data and information to potentially disrupt and bring innovation in other areas. So for example, if you're thinking about sales innovation right now, if you are a retailer, you tend to say, okay, I have a spend graph, and then I have a social graph from Facebook connections. How can I use local NFC technologies to basically increase what people will be buying in store? Well, there's another set of information and data that no one's really thought about, which is the gamer graph, right? And typically right now, the gamer graph exists in one game within individual companies, not even at a line level throughout the same game company. Now, if you actually have platform plays that have the gamer graph across the industry, then those types of questions of intersection of spend, social, and gamer graph get very interesting. And you're looking at a real big play that's actually disrupting a completely different market.
Do you see shifting demographies as far as the entrepreneurs are concerned in gaming? And the following question to that is, now it is an open world. Do you see a lot more access to geographies around the world for this profile of entrepreneurs?
Right. So I'd say geography-wise, I've seen a lot more game companies from around the world, right? And because the openness of the app stores, there is always, someone could be sitting in India in a very small town and make a game that is quite successful here, right? So the number of companies that actually make it to that point is lower, and that might be because of the cultural design differences, right? If you grew up in the US, there's a certain way you think about games. You're not going to have that if you grew up in a place with less internet penetration, other people you play games with, right? But still, we've seen quite a bit, right? So in the Yetizen Accelerator program itself, we have had an Israeli game studio. We've had a Spanish one, a French one, a Polish one this current round, and a British one, right? So within our 5 rounds of 30 companies, you're already seeing, quite a set from around the world.
What is your personal motivation to carry this forward?
So that vision I painted, where you have the 3 levels of data and this amazing innovation that happens at the center of that, that's a very high-level theoretical vision, right? Now, at the actual execution level of that, gamer graph can mean so many things. If I know that you go to specialties, once a week to get a croissant at a certain time, and if you get messages about which your friends are and coupons, those guys join you. Now, if I also knew that you tend to be competitive about certain things, imagine the level of messaging I could give you right at that point,
sure.
Right? And that competitiveness, that's one slice of the gamer graph. The potential is huge. So my personal vision is that in 4 or 5 years, I've actually empowered more companies to be able to get more of the gamer graph faster at lower financing so they can work on that big vision of that intersection. And at that point, I want to be in the center of it all with my fingers in everything.
I think you can't go wrong. Again, wishing you all the best.
Thank you very much.